Well, we're going to talk about a topic which is a very difficult and challenging subject because it hits right to the core of what it means to be human. We are meant to uh, exist and to have children and to have families. And yet, in times of mass mimetic insanity, when we have a time in which delusion becomes the reigning ideology for various reasons, when you have a decrepit empire that needs a full renaissance but doesn't have it yet, you produce really disturbing patterns of behavior built into even the legal system. And we have with us someone who's going to testify to that fact in his fight against the insanity of our time, a gentleman named Harrison Tinsley. How you doing, sir?
I'm wonderful. Thanks for having me on, David. And I agree with you. I think being a dad, being a parent, having kids is the most important thing you can do.
Well, very good. So let's talk a little bit about your story. You've been in the news because of some horrible things that you've had to watch happen to your only begotten son, your son who
Right?
has been caught up in the court system, right? And tell us a little bit about, just give us an overview of what of your story real quick.
You want my story just regarding the court stuff?
Yeah. Well, just the whole, yeah, however you want to start it, wherever you want to start it. Those two things.
Well, I grew up in a small town in Northern California. My parents are married still. I got three siblings, four of us total. So the ideal for me was always to have a big family like that. And essentially, when a few years back, I met a girl and we were dating. We were having wonderful times together, some ups and downs. She had some mental problems, but generally a good relationship. And she got pregnant. We were both happy about that fact, thankfully. Um, Even though we disagreed politically, we agreed on that we wanted to have this kid, which is absolutely amazing. And we even agreed upon the name. That's one of the few things we agreed upon. But as the pregnancy went on, uh, in my opinion, her mental illness got stronger and she began to treat me very terribly. Would constantly threaten me that I'm not going to see my son if this or that, if I'm not like exactly who she wants me to be. And it got to a point where she had her attorney send me a letter saying like it's like a cease and desist, basically saying not to talk to her. And so to avoid any legal trouble, I didn't. And then, I mean, I remembered the due date of my son's birthday, of course. And I guess about 1 week after he was born, one of her friends showed me that, which I was thankful for. I missed that, obviously, which is crazy because you hear these people that are like rock stars and they're Navy SEALs and they've done these amazing things in their lives. And even they are like, the best day of my life is the day my kid was born, you know? So it's a bummer I missed that, but it's all right now because I'm with him. And essentially, she was born. I find out 2 months after he was born. I filed in court, San Francisco, through like a self-help center. I filed all this stuff to establish paternity and get visitation rights, etc. And that process took a long time, partially delayed because COVID, but also just her attorney delaying it every step of the way that they could. And so after 13 months in court, my son was 15 months old, and I finally met him. And that was one of the best days of my life for sure. It was surreal.
Tell us
And
about
then,
that. What happened that day?
well, that day, um, my mom went with me. We went to see him. Um, One of her friends was there, like spectating as I did it. I just kind of spent the day with him. We were playing outside. They were being
Like a
weird because
playground you meet at a park or something, or
no, it was at her parents' house in the backyard. Was the first time, and I remember he did a little headstand, and I did it with him, and then we were just being silly, just doing little kid stuff. And he's only 15 months old, and then I remember uh, when he took a nap that day. I went to put him down for the nap, and he wanted me to lay there, and it took a while, and he finally fell asleep. And I remember I laid on the ground just crying. I don't often cry, but it was just like something I can't even describe. Like I've lost loved ones and stuff and been sad, but this was well beyond that. I was just an emotion I can't even imagine. The amount of joy or love that I was feeling was just something out of this world. I mean, being a dad, literally transcends everything else. You know, I love sports, I love music. There's things that I think are so cool, snowboarding. Um, and but it's so much better than that. It's just the most meaningful, amazing thing ever. And yeah, I mean, that's the gist of the story of that day. And it's since then, basically the judge hinted at something like, oh, if you move back to the Bay Area, I'd be inclined to perhaps give you custody. So I moved to the Bay Area and filed, and I got half custody. I was extremely thankful for that. It's absolutely wonderful. And then since then, things have transpired. Some of the things you've mentioned with the gender stuff, as well as some other safety concerns, we'll say, and presented all that to court in trial. And the court decided to keep custody the same. And so that's the decision I'm appealing right now.
So tell us a little bit about the challenges that you feel the need to protect your child from that, you know, has caught the attention of the nation right now.
Well, I don't think it's right to put a little boy in dresses and makeup, and he expresses to me that he doesn't like that. He expresses fully that he's a boy. He's very adamant about it. If you even give him, I think this is causing like mental distress in him, because if someone, he say he's playing with his cousins that are girls, and they give him a girl's toy, he might get mad and say, no, I'm not a girl, I'm a boy, when he should just play with them like it's nothing, you know? But it's causing this reaction in his head, sadly. I'm
Like an
glad that
existential crisis, a little bit, right? Like, what am I?
yeah,
Right?
yeah, like he knows, so he knows he's a boy. He'll yell at you about it. He'll just tell you. He loves being a little boy too. I mean, it couldn't be more obvious. You watch little boys play, you watch little girls play. He's one of the boys. Like he's running around, he's wrestling, he's climbing, he's shooting Nerf guns, he's doing all of it. He's all about it, you know? Um, so I mean, for me, you know, it's obviously heartbreaking thing to see and talk to your son about. Um, and then as well in court, there was other issues legally, um, things involving police and CPS, etc. So stuff like that was presented to the court as well.
And so you're talking about when you say the gender ideology that this person has made a choice to raise your son as a non-binary. Is that right?
To the best of my knowledge,
Yeah.
that's what they're doing. Yeah.
And
Uh,
so every day you get the child, they're dressed in a non-binary way, or
Not exactly. He's usually dressed as a boy.
yeah.
Um, there's been a few times I've seen like a pink shirt on him or like a girl's diaper. Not those aren't a big deal, of course, but still kind of weird. But I know from social media, people have shown me pictures where he's dressed in dresses and makeup. And he told me a story one time, this really horrible story. She took him to Disneyland, and I know that this is true because she told me that even one time months back, and he's told me months later, he's like, Dad, and you know when your son's talking to you, if he's expressing something like that's serious or funny, or you know how he's talking to you because you know them so well. And he said, "Well, when I went to Disneyland, I couldn't go on the rides unless I wore my princess shoes." I was like, what do you mean? What do you mean exactly? And he's just like, yeah, mommy wouldn't let me go on the rides unless I wore my princess shoes. So I just calmly was like, oh, well, that's not very nice, buddy. Next time you should say, no, I don't want to wear those. And I don't think it's nice for you to try to make me wear those to go on the rides. And I mean, that's a perfect example, assuming what he's saying is true, which I totally believe it is. You know, little kids don't make up stuff like that. I mean, that's just so wrong to do to a kid. You know, you like took him all the way to Disneyland, and you can't go on the rides unless you do something specific that you don't want to do. I mean, that's just horrifying.
Yeah, we don't understand how so much of trying to conform to what the television tells us is cool and avant-garde ends up creating scenarios where there's bullying involved, you know, and gaslighting, right? You know, and
Right.
that's sad because I think we live in the age of victim narcissism, in which you have to pretend to be a victim in order to exploit and gaslight and attack and harm
Precisely.
and bully. And anybody tries to say stop, you say, well, You're the one hurting me because you're telling me to stop, and that's the problem we have in our culture is there's a license to be very vicious and very hateful and bullying so long as you dress it up in some kind of victim claim.
Yeah, they say it's like in the name of love and compassion, even though it's the exact opposite. It's
Yeah.
very interesting.
Yeah, and it's sadly infected almost everything in our mass culture. Although you can go to places in America where that victim narcissism is not quite as deep and saturated, but it is a contagion, a social contagion that is very alarming and disturbing because children should be the most protected and honored and venerated in terms of people groups in our society. And if you don't have that in place, you have an absolutely brutish situation on hand.
Oh, yeah.
Another thing I saw you mention in your Give, Send, Go, which we'll put a link to about your situation, is this desire to impose this discredited product that was pushed on humanity during the pandemic.
Right.
Completely discredited product, and has that gone through yet, or are you able to push back on that?
There's gonna be a hearing about it in the future, so I don't want to talk too much about that specifically because there's pending hearing on that exact thing. But I do think it's not right for the court on their own to make a hearing about something. Normally people have to put in like a request for order either side for things. So it's definitely interesting.
And that again is a quite nightmarish situation because this is a product that again has been thoroughly discredited by all the scientific evidence as having any effect with the current versions of this disease that are currently spreading, around.
And they've declared the emergencies over. The WHO
Yeah.
said that they don't think kids should take it anymore, I believe.
Many countries
many
won't let
countries, yeah.
their kids near this product.
Yep.
We have psychopaths again who are victim narcissist freaks in power in our country that they have this nurse ratchet mindset. Where I have power
Right.
and I want to impose on people that can't say no, and that includes children, unfortunately.
Right.
And it's sick and it's sadistic. But again, we have to just point out these different touch points because it's a shame that our society has succumbed to such madness as law and as precedent for family protections, right? That an experimental product that has a very, very dangerous health profile has to be even like that the father has no right to protect their children from this.
Well, to be fair, they haven't forced it yet, and I have a
Yeah.
chance to argue at least. Well, I get a fair shot. Who knows? But
Yeah.
at least they're giving me a chance. They weren't just like, oh, nope, do it tomorrow. They didn't do that. To be fair to them, I mostly agree with what you're saying.
Yeah.
It is scary that the way it was pushed during the pandemic and the way people were treated if they were skeptic of it even, or they asked questions or didn't want to get it. It was like they really tried to make you out to be less of a person than someone who did get it.
Yeah. I think we need to turn it makes a case that I have made, which is that we need to return to a non-monopoly based system of marriage and relationship covenants such that these things can be protected by other institutions outside of government, which is the way it used to be, right? So that if you wanted to form a family in a institution, a particular church or something, that they would have their own covenantal agreement about how to deal with issues like, well, if there's an experimental product, what rights do we have? And you would have that covenantal agreement as the beginning and foundation of your relationship to protect the children and the family and everything else. And the same thing for, things like, well, what happens if an experimental madness, insane ideology comes along that wants to use microwaved ideology from John Money, who was a freak, and Michel Foucault, who was a sick freak. What happens when that gets into vogue? Well, your faith institution would have a covenant section, whatever, that says we're not doing that. And then so anything the court would do would just to be enforce that private contract, just like if you had a contract with somebody to do your your landscaping or something in your house. So
That's an interesting idea.
I think that that's something that we have to use the terrors and the pains and the sufferings that people are experiencing all around this country, like yourself. We have to use that as fodder to rebuild and to build something better, to break the monopoly of these family systems. When you have one size fits all, well, when madness takes over the country, that one size fits all is going to end up creating total chaos and fragile family structures.
Yeah.
Well, tell us a little bit about what what you are trying to advance in your media appearances and your call to the public. What do you want them to know? What are some of the top priorities you want people to understand?
The main thing I want to stress is that we need to protect children at all costs. As you said earlier, they're the most innocent, wonderful things in this world, most worthy of protection. And I think we're at this moment in history where we have to do something about it. Like, this is the time we have to accept that duty and step up to protect kids from this gender ideology. We need to hold doctors, parents accountable if they do irreversible damage to children. We have to stop these hormones and surgeries. And beyond that, I generally want what's best for the country. And I think that dads should have a more fair shot in family court, for sure. I think that's really important. We can see the stats on how successful kids are, whether they have a dad in the home or not. And single dad homes are also more successful than single mother homes from my research.
Why do you think that is?
So what I gather, if you were to break it down as simply as possible, would be they tend to have a higher income and they're more likely to be remarried. So those would be the two reasons I hypothesize that would be. But 27% of dads don't even get to see their kids, even when they're attempting to. So 18% of dads win full custody as opposed to 82% of moms, roughly. And child support goes one way a lot more and a lot higher numbers as well. And I just don't think the family court system's very fair to fathers. And I think that's something we could work on as well.
Yeah, I remember Kanye West said he thought that his dad abandoned him, and then he realized later on that his mother had threatened his father that if you come to this area, to see him, you will never see your son again. We'll make sure you don't see your son again. That
Wow.
kind of evil attitude can be done even from people who are loving in other areas, which is so strange.
Yeah.
It's the sadness of humanity that people who could be so paradoxical, filled with love in one moment and filled with evil in another. But
Well,
being
the
able,
line between good and evil cuts through every human heart, right?
that's
So
right.
we all have that battle, and you see that in the Bible, you see that in Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, everything.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a reason for that statement being so true. And it's interesting. People will be married and have these children together and stuff, and then they have a divorce, and they'll even acknowledge it later in life, like, oh yeah, we were so mean to each other, we shouldn't have been. But it's just like this automatic thing. And I wonder if it's them giving into like a negative human nature, or if it's also at least partially has to do with the court system themselves, because these lawyers are telling them like, oh, well, you got to say this if you want to see the kids more, or what you want more money, or whatever. And I wonder if that plays into it as well in the family court system.
Yeah, that's true. Um, there's a there's a commodification and a financialization of that whole family system.
Right.
When you incentivize people to split because they need to follow their own bliss, um, that's two mortgages instead of one mortgage. That's nice money
Yeah.
for the bankers. You know, two toothbrushes instead of one. Maybe all these things get done, and then
Right.
you get medications. Oftentimes, right? People get on medications, and kids are acting out because it's traumatic to have to go from one house to the next, back and forth. It's so disruptive to a sense of home and a sense of
Right.
safety, and stability, and normal. And when normal is traditional in one home and then chaotic, whatever Michel Foucault's ideas seeped into BuzzFeed.com today as your directive for life, that's going to create an absolute, kind of a schizoid. What do I do? What's real? What's true?
Right.
and it creates cynicism. I think Generation Z has, you know, a lot of examples of having an inability to tell, to like, they're stuck in this kind of like everything is so ironic that nothing is real and nothing is authentic, you know?
Right.
I think that's a product of this, you know?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the two household thing, I was fortunate enough that my parents, they're still happily married. Extremely lucky and thankful. A lot of my friends, of course, were not, and my son has to deal with it. And it seems by like what I can tell, he's doing a great job. He's a happy-go-lucky kid. It's really amazing. I'm I know routine's so important that it definitely disrupts kids, and there's studies on that. I mean, are you from a two-parent household or
Yeah.
divorce or
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
okay. Nice, yeah. It's a problem for sure. The divorce rate's so high. It's sad.
Yeah. And it's, let's talk a little bit about some things that you would advise people having gone through some of this stuff yourself. What are some advice you have for keeping a happy home for a boy who's going in such a back and forth thing? And also, not just back and forth, but like you said, having these competing worldviews clash in terms of shaping his worldview.
Right. Well, I try to keep a good routine for sure. Children love routine and structure. Um, Try to be positive and don't let your emotions go on to the kid. You know, it's not their job to deal with your emotions. You have to deal with them yourself, as the Stoics would say. So you don't want to have too much up and down on the kids because they don't understand what's happening and they don't understand nuance and stuff. Um, yeah, I think you got to do your best to teach them what you believe's right and to help them learn and grow and have fun and be silly. They just love spending time with you. You don't even have to do like immaculate things like go snowboarding or go to Hawaii or whatever cool things people do. And I take Sawyer snowboarding, but um, you know, like them just spending time with you is what matters to them. That's it. They don't care. You're just at the park. You're just in the house being silly. Like those little moments you could call them, as opposed to big ones, are just as important. And just try to cherish them and be there for your kid.
And where do you think this desire to deconstruct gender at a young age, where does that come from? What's their desire for that? Just trying to liberate them to find their true self, or what do you really think's going on there?
I don't think so. I mean, Alfred Kinsey, John Money had some, as you said earlier, sick roots, but I think it's more a narcissistic thing through the parent, in my opinion, more like a to get on the victimhood hierarchy
Hmm.
themselves as opposed to doing something for the kid. I think it's more on the parents, to be
Huh.
honest with you.
Can you unpack that a little bit? That's an interesting thought.
Yeah, I think it's they want to get likes on their social media and have people be like, oh, that's so amazing. You have a kid that's non-binary or transgender. And it opens up like a
Attention
com
economy.
yeah, exactly. Gets them attention and their circle of friends and their groups. I really think it's just about that. I don't think they're really thinking about what's best for the kid.
And so it's more like they just accept that they heard it on TV or the internet that this is true and they accept it in a fundamentalist sense. They don't, you know, I believe, you know, the TV says it, I believe it, that settles it, you know. And then it's about trying to you know vicariously use children as a means of demonstrating one's um, alignment with sacred victimhood, you know.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
um how do you think that ideology can, I mean, I'm not talking about in your particular situation but just in general, how do you think that ideology can be uh, defeated culturally, in the sense of like, let's get past this rather than this being the new normal for generations to come?
Right. Well, I think we have the momentum. I think most people are against it, and I think we're doing really good. We got to keep speaking up like you and me are doing. I think it's really important. We just have to, first of all, again, we should hold doctors and parents accountable to do irreversible damage to children. You know, that's hormone blockers and sex change surgery. As I mean, although you could argue that there could be serious emotional damage from even dressing them certain ways and calling
Right.
them things that they're not. However, I think if we just keep calling it out, we just say, look, this is ludicrous. It's unacceptable. You're not going to do this to children. It's not okay. We got to keep speaking up. We got to be courageous. and just every chance we get, call it out and fight it.
Yeah. Well, very good. Harrison, tell us where we can follow your work and your advocacy on behalf of your son's rights and the fight that you're doing to try to make sure that more people can have freedom from some of these imposed ideologies.
There's a Give Send Go for attorney's fees. That's at Give Send Go Saving Sawyer. And then all my social media, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter is Harrison Tinsley. Should pop right up. You can find my songs on YouTube as well. And I'd love to have anyone join me in the fight.
Well, very good. Thank you, Harrison. I appreciate what you're doing to fight for children's rights. It's a truly noble endeavor.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on, man.